All right, Shalom. I want to give all the praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai Bahasham, Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who taught me this truth. Shalom to the hopeful elect. I'm back with another quick lesson through the Holy Spirit, the Rakakwadash. And I want to get into this video here. All right, open up with this video. This is from ABC News. Came out a couple hours ago today. The headline here says, "We're not at the precipice of a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine, Rubio." All right, so this is the spirit. Okay, who can resist the will of the Most High? Okay, no peace.
And I'm joined now by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Good morning, Mr. Secretary. Thanks for joining us this morning. President Trump has touted this summit as a huge success, but the president going into that said he wanted a ceasefire, he wanted the killing stop, and there would be consequences. Let's take another listen to what he said just before that summit.
Will Russia face any consequences if Vladimir Putin does not agree to stop the war after your meeting on Friday?
Yes, they will. Yeah.
What will the consequences
there will be
be?
consequences.
Sanctions, tariffs?
There will be, I don't have to say, there will be very severe consequences. I won't be happy if I walk away without some form of a ceasefire.
So, Mr. Secretary, the fighting hasn't stopped, the killing hasn't stopped, and there is no ceasefire. What changed President Trump's mind?
Well, I don't think his mind has changed at all. I think ultimately, if this whole effort doesn't work out, then there's going to have to be additional consequences to Russia. But we're trying to avoid that by reaching a peace agreement. And that's not going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of work. I think there were things that were identified in those talks that we just had a couple days ago that made some progress in some directions. Now, obviously, in order for us to get a peace agreement, Ukraine has to be a part of it. They have to be included. They have to be involved. That's why the president called them on the phone immediately after we got on the airplane. Within an hour, he talked to them for long periods of time. That's why President Zelensky will be traveling to Washington tomorrow, along with several European leaders as well, to continue to work on this. We made progress in the sense that we identified potential areas of agreement, but there remain some big areas of disagreement. So we're still a long ways off. I mean, we're not at the precipice of a peace agreement. We're not at the edge of one, but I do think progress was made towards one. But again,
but Secretary Rubio,
Yeah, see? Again, who could resist the will of the Most High? All right? Yahweh Shemel Shai, he wants war. Okay? Bodies are not going to stop dropping. Okay? War is going to continue to go on until it spills over into nuclear war between America and Russia. All right? That's prophecy. Romans 9:19, he says, Thou wilt say then unto me, why doeth he yet find fault? For who have resisted his will, right? Nay, but O man, who art thou that replies against Yahweh Shemel Shai? Shall the thing formed say to him that formed it, why hast thou made me thus, right? So the point is that Yahweh Shemel Shai is the ultimate authority. Okay? You can't change what the Lord has already ordained. Okay? This is all headed towards nuclear war, World War III, and there's no stopping that. Okay? Proverbs 21 and verse 1, it says the king's heart, the king's mind, right? The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, Yahweh Shemel Shai. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. All right, so the Most High is in control of the minds of the kings. Okay, Yahweh Shemel Shai is controlling, Vladimir Putin, man. Okay, he's going to be used as a vessel. Okay, to bring in the war of Armageddon. There's not going to be any peace. All right, no matter how hard these devils try to come up with some type of agreement, some ceasefire, or whatever the case is, it's not going to happen. Okay, the Lord is in control of the full spectrum of things, man. Okay.
we don't know what any of that progress is, and the president went into that meeting.
You're not going to.
Okay, the president went into that meeting saying he wanted a ceasefire, and there would be consequences if they didn't agree on a ceasefire in that meeting, and they didn't agree to a ceasefire. So where are the consequences?
That's not the aim of this meeting. Look, first of all, you're not going to reach
the president
a ceasefire
said that
or
was
even
the
a peace
aim.
agreement. Yeah, but you're not going to reach a ceasefire or a peace agreement in a meeting in which only one side is represented. That's why it's important to bring both leaders together, and that's the goal here. The president has said what he'd like to see at some point is we make enough progress so both leaders, Zelensky and Putin, can meet somewhere and finalize this. The only way to finalize a peace agreement is you have to have both sides agree to it and both sides of it involved. How many times have we heard from the Ukrainians and from others, there is nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine? Well, Ukraine wasn't at the meeting, but this was a very important meeting. Now, ultimately, if there isn't a peace agreement, if there isn't an end of this war, the president's been clear there are going to be consequences, but we're trying to avoid that. And the way we're trying to avoid those consequences is with an even better consequence, which is peace, the end of hostilities. That's the aim. That's the goal here. And the president, he deserves a lot of credit. This is not our, look, when he says this, it's true. The United States is not at war. This is not our war. Ultimately, what daily life in America looks like will not be materially altered one way or another about what happens in Ukraine. We have.
Yeah. All right. Everything he's saying, it's not going to happen. Isaiah 48:22, there is no peace, saith the Lord, Yahweh Shemel Shai, unto the wicked. Okay? This is the Most High's movie. All right? The Lord wants war, and war is going to happen. All right? Ezekiel 7:25. Destruction cometh, and they shall seek peace, and there should be none. All right? This is why it's the spirit, right? Trump-Putin summit ends with no ceasefire. Okay?
Dedicated time and energy to this because this president has made it a priority of his administration to promote peace and end or prevent wars. He's made that a priority. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for the amount of time and energy that we have invested in something like this. And he's the only one in the world that could do it. Okay, none of these other leaders in Europe could get Putin to a meeting to talk seriously about any of this. So this is going to be difficult. It's been going on for 3.5 years. You have two very entrenched sides, and we're going to have to continue to work and chip away at it. I think we made some real progress. You talked about not knowing what was discussed. These peace deals, these peace agreements and negotiations, they don't work when they're conducted in the media, either through leaks or through lies. And usually they're both the same thing, lying leaks. Okay, they don't work if you do it that way. And they don't work if you go out and say aggressive and abrasive things about one side or the other, because then they just walk away.
Can you name any concessions that Vladimir Putin made during this meeting? Have any
I wouldn't name them on your program.
Have any concessions
I wouldn't name them on your program. Why would I do that?
Where is the
pressure?
pressure?
Of course, because you can't have a peace agreement. No, you can't have a peace agreement unless both sides give and get. You can't have a peace agreement unless both sides make concessions. That's a fact. That's true in virtually any negotiation. If not, it's just called surrender. And neither side is going to surrender. So both sides are going to have to make concessions. So, of course, concessions were asked.
Yes, and that's the will of the Most High. Okay? Both sides are not going to surrender to the point where, hey, it's just going to lead to a full, all-out war. All right? And that's what the Lord wants. All right? Isaiah 55. In verse 11, it says, so shall my word be that goeth forth out of my mouth. All right. And the Lord's word is going out of his mouth by the way of his prophets. All right. It says it shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please. You see, the will of the Lord will be accomplished. There's no altering that. There's no changing it. Okay. Basically, what these Edomites are doing is all in vain. Okay, but it shall accomplish that which I please, and it shall prosper in the thing whereto I sent it. Right. So again, you're not gonna disannul. You're not gonna change what the Most High has already ordained. All right.
But what utility would there be of me going on a program and tell you we've wagged our finger at Putin and told him you must do this and you must do that? It's only going to make it harder and less likely that they're going to agree to these things. So these negotiations, as much as everyone would love it to be a live pay-per-view event, these discussions only work best when they are conducted privately in serious negotiations in which people who have to go back and respond to constituencies, because even totalitarian governments have constituencies they have to respond to. People have to go back and defend these agreements that they make, and figure out a way to explain them to people. So we need to create space for concessions to be made. But of course, concessions were asked.
Does the president favor giving up territory that Ukraine now controls, specifically in the Donetsk region? Sources are telling us that's what was asked.
Well, first of all, I mean, Putin has given repeated speeches now for 2.5 years. There's one they always cite, which talks about taking most of Ukraine and his view of history and how so forth and so on. The second thing the president, so we know what their side is demanding, and we obviously know the Ukrainians are not in agreement with any of that. The second point I would make is the president has said repeatedly, when it comes to territories and territorial claims, that's ultimately something Ukraine will have to decide. It's their territory, it's their country. Ultimately, what they're willing to live with is what they'll have to decide on. Maybe the answer is they're not willing to live with any of this. We don't know, but that's what we need to explore. In the meantime, the one thing we do know that Ukraine has said repeatedly and publicly talked about is security guarantees. They need to be able to enter into security guarantees that ensure that this is never going to happen again, that they're not going to get reinvaded in 2.5 or 3 years or 4 years or whenever it may be. They don't want to be back here again. They want to be able to go on to rebuild their country and live their lives. That's a very reasonable request. That's something we're working on, and that's something the Russian side has to understand, obviously, is that as a sovereign country, Ukraine has a right, like every sovereign country, to enter into security alliances and agreements with other countries. So these are some of the things that we'll be discussing.
Hey, bottom line is this, right? Russia, okay? Russia is not going to bend, all right? Isaiah 13 in verse 17, all right? Babylon will fall to the Medes, all right, which represents the Russians now. All right, Isaiah 13 and 17. Behold, I will stir up the Medes against them. Who's them? Babylon, America. Which should not regard silver, and as for gold, they should not delight in it. Let's read that in the NLT. All right, same verse, Isaiah 13, 17. It says, look, I will stir up the Medes against Babylon. They cannot be tempted by silver or bribed with gold. Again, there's no negotiation. There's no, agreements. Okay, as you heard, America and Russia are not gonna they're not gonna submit. All right. So what's the only solution? Which is war. All right. So the point, is that, as we had up here earlier, all right, can Western nations be saved? All right. We know the answer to that. The answer is no. And before we go on to the next video, I just want to read this point that I have highlighted here from this article. All right. Because, hey, this is it. Okay. It says the nearly century-long project to destroy the West by flooding the West with foreigners who despise the West is finally coming to a head. Perhaps it is too late to rectify the damage caused by generations of unelected bureaucrats and Marxist globalists who have done more to undermine their own countries by erasing national borders than any foreign enemy ever could. We will soon find out whether Great Britain may survive as an island that natives will find safe enough to call home, or whether the United Kingdom will surrender what is left of its sovereignty to those who wish to conquer it in the name of foreign gods, anodyne, quote, multiculturalism, and totemic worship of, quote, diversity. All right, and these are the same problems that's going on over here in America. It says if the West survival were not such a serious issue, the outrageous lengths to which its leaders have gone to arrange its suicide would almost be comical. Central banks have depreciated the value of common currencies to such a degree that Westerners' cost of living continues to rise while suitable jobs are steadily exported overseas. The rate of home ownership is in a free fall. Fewer Westerners can afford to have a single child, much less financially support large families. Even if Westerners could support large families, the West cultural vanguard has spent the last 100 years encouraging women to kill their babies, choose careers over families, and regard men as evil foot soldiers of the dreaded patriarchy. You see? So it's a done deal, all right, for the Western nations as we see here, all right? America will not be saved. Babylon can't be healed, all right? Let's get that. Okay? You can't fight against prophecy. Jeremiah 51 and 8. It says, Babylon is suddenly fallen and destroyed. How for her take balm for her pain? If so, she may be healed. All right, this is what these devils are trying to do. They're trying to come up with every way to restore Babylon back to glory. But it's not going to happen. Okay? That's not the will of the Most High. We would have healed Babylon, but she is not healed. Forsake her and let us go everyone into his own country. For her judgment reacheth unto heaven and is lifted up even to the skies. All right. So Babylon is about to be rewarded with the ultimate destruction. All right, which is nuclear war. Okay. So much is going on right now, man. As you see, Trump, militarizing the federal agencies to come against, Jake and the people who, that have certain, viewpoints and beliefs towards this system, this government. All right, you got the tariffs that's, bringing up the price of living. Okay, the supply chain shortages, the famines. Okay, civil wars, nuclear war. All right, it's just a complete disaster for this place, man. All right, so we're watching the Lord, continue to break down the society piece by piece. Right now, I want to get into this, the main part here in this lesson. All right, so this is from Redacted. Okay, it says, in 31 days, everything changes for the U.S. dollar, and Trump knows it. Right? Let's play that.
And I'm not just talking about the value of our currency. I'm talking about our currency being used throughout the world.
You want it to remain. You want the dollar to remain the world's reserve currency.
Well, I think it's bigger than losing any war.
In 31 days, everything changes for the U.S. dollar. And Trump knows it, by the way. He knows we're not talking about some vague, far-off threat here. We're talking about a countdown clock that has already been ticking. Trump is already kind of gearing up for this. He's been hinting at it over the past few weeks. So in 31 days, the Fed takes action to further weaken the U.S. dollar, slashing interest rates. They know that trouble is on the horizon. That's the only reason they're doing it. And while most of the media is still asleep at the wheel, the truth is the dollar's grip on the world is slipping fast. Americans are suffering. And honestly, that was the backdrop of this week's meeting with President Trump and President Putin. A declining U.S. dollar, the rise of the BRICS nations. Zero Hedge, by the way, just published a damning, really eye-opening report about...
Real quick, before we play on, he had made mention about American suffering, right? Let's play that real quick, and we'll go back. All right.
Hey TikTok, I'm just on here wondering if anybody's feeling the same way I'm feeling. I'm from Illinois and I feel like the gas prices and the electric bills and the prices of food is just so overwhelming anymore. Like, I'm wondering if anybody else is feeling like they're drowning and they can't get out. I work overtime and I cannot get above water. I mean, I literally have no gas for next week. It was either that or get a few groceries to get by. I hit my local food pantries. I'm just wondering if anybody else feels like they're drowning. But anyway, I hope everybody has a great day.
See, hey, the struggle is real. All right, Isaiah 24. Right, let's get that in the NLT. Right, Isaiah 24 and verse 8 NLT. It says, "The cheerful sound of tambourines is stilled; the happy cries of celebration are heard no more." All right, people are getting their ass kicked, man. All right, I went into that the American fatigue. All right. People are struggling, tired of working, questioning life right now, right? The happy cries of celebration are heard no more. The melodious chords of the harp are silent. Gone are the joys of wine and song. Alcoholic drink turns bitter in the mouth. The city withers in chaos. Every home is locked to keep out intruders. Mobs gather in the streets crying out for wine. Joy has turned to gloom. Gladness has been banished from the land. All right, that's what's going on here. The city is left in ruins, the gates battered down. Yep.
The rise of the BRICS nations. Zero Hedge, by the way, just published a damning, really eye-opening report about the US dollar and BRICS nations using gold to get around the US dollar. They're building an entirely new trade and financial system right before our eyes. Putin walked into this meeting in a much stronger position than he's ever had before. So today I want to break all of this down for you, all of these news items that have happened over the past few days and where we're headed in the next month. We're going to look at what's happening inside the United States right now with the Fed, what's happening globally with the rise of the BRICS nations, why central banks are buying so much gold like there's no tomorrow. And at the end, I'm going to tell you how I'm personally preparing for this recession that is likely coming in the next few months, even though the mainstream media doesn't want you to be aware of it because they make so much money. The mainstream media makes so much money on trying to trick you into believing that everything is fine. Really, they do. So let's start with what just happened in Washington, D.C. That was a big story that I saw almost no coverage of. Some of the financial press covered it, but pretty much everyone else ignored it. President Trump appointed Stephen Miran to the Federal Reserve. Now the press tried to play this off as some kind of temporary appointment, no big deal. But let me be clear, Miran is not just a placeholder. This guy has been very open about his views. He believes the US dollar is too strong and that America needs a weaker dollar to stay competitive and to deal with our insane debt load, which just hit $37 trillion last week. You need a weaker dollar. That's the only way. You got to devalue the currency. How else are you going to afford paying $1 trillion on interest payments alone on that $37 trillion in debt? The answer is you're not.
Yep. Habakkuk 2 and 6. It says, shall not all these take up a parable against him, a taunting proverb against him, and say, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his, how long? And to him that ladeth himself with thick clay. All right. That thick clay is going into that debt. All right. That America cannot get out of. All right. Those, as you go into this word, thick clay. All right. Those heavy pledges. All right. Heavy debts, weight of pledges, man. All right. So as we all know, you know, Trump and there's articles out here support what's being said, man. All right. People know that Trump is, you know, setting up this economy for failure, man. All right. Because this thing is getting ready to crash out. And then they already have the MOTB infrastructure ready. All right. Digital payments, the CBDCs, all these things are on deck, man. All right. So there's not much time left for this American economy. All right. We understand that they're pressed for time. They have to go ahead and push that chip, man. All right. So everything about this economy is spiraling down the drain, right?
That's what he believes. And Trump hinted at this about a week ago when he said he was okay with a weakening US dollar because that means we make more money.
Well, you know, I'm a person that likes a strong dollar, but a weak dollar makes you a hell of a lot more money.
So this is coming, guys. Think about what that means. The US government is basically admitting the dollar is going to be taken down a peg, maybe several pegs. And the markets already see it coming. Everybody is betting on a rate cut in September. Rate cuts weaken the dollar. And when that happens, money starts pouring into hard assets like gold. But it's not just the Fed. Here in the United States, something remarkable is happening that the mainstream media barely mentions. States are starting to bring back real money. Yeah, 5 states in the United States have now passed laws making gold and silver legal tender. This isn't symbolic. It's a revolt against fiat money, against government currency. Basically a middle finger to the US dollar against the idea that pieces of paper with nothing behind them should be trusted forever. So lawmakers are saying out loud what we all know, the dollar's days as the thing we all rely on are coming to an end. Listen to Colonel McGregor on our show just a few weeks ago talking about the undercurrent of everything that's happening right now as the BRICS nations rise.
Remember, Putin just a few weeks ago spoke to the leaders of all the major industries and firms in the private sector in Russia and said it's time to come to terms with reality that these sanctions are never going to go away. The West is not going to finally wake up and turn back towards us and recognize that we're not the enemy. So we have to build bridges elsewhere. Those bridges are being built. It's called BRICS. And of course, you have the other supporting organizations like the Shanghai Cooperation Council and other entities, but they're all part of the same. Let's move away from the United States. Let's get out from under these people. Let's no longer be dependent upon them so that we can live in peace. In other words, in a very interesting way, the Chinese, the Russians, and the whole global South and everybody is practicing a form of containment towards us.
But it gets worse. Globally, central banks are buying gold at a record pace. We're talking 4 straight years of over 1,000 tons of gold. Russia is leading the way. They're not doing this for fun. They're doing it to insulate themselves from the U.S. financial system. So when Putin was meeting with Trump this weekend, he had more cards than he's ever had before. Now, I know, all the MAGA crowd, like the Trump can never do any wrong crowd, were like praising the fact that we had all these bombers flying over Putin's head and what a show of power. And look at that. He's so powerful compared to Putin. Great. I love my president. I love the United States of America. I want our president to be powerful. But I'm telling you, it's totally different. President Putin has more cards than he's ever had before. Totally different scenario than the last time he was on American soil 10 years ago. Sanctions haven't worked against Russia. Russia has won a war against all of NATO. NATO poured everything they had into Ukraine, and Russia destroyed them. He might be a foot smaller than Trump, but he was in the ultimate position. And Russia didn't buy that much gold because they're just curious about it. Hey, what's this like? Like sort of dating in college. No, you do it because you know the system is about to shift. That's why they're doing it. And you want to be holding real assets when this shift happens, when the music stops and you have to sit down on that chair.
Yeah. And that's it, man. Okay? Hey, the fall of this economy is coming, man. All right? Babylon's end is here. So just wait on it. Shalom.